All right, good morning, everyone. It's 9:05. We'll get underway. I'll introduce myself. My name is Jeff Boutilier. I'm the president of Ascent Strategy. And those of you who have tuned into the Business Resilience series before will recognize me as your ongoing host. So we are here at session number 4 of the Business Resilience series, our 5th overall, and delighted to have so many of you with us again today. We have an excellent panel and a slightly modified format, so we'll get right into it. Quick introduction to the Business Resilience series. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, it's a community-driven initiative. We've got some great community partners that have come together to try to connect folks with reliable and accurate information during the whole COVID-19 pandemic. The series has evolved a little bit over the last number of weeks. We started out with a pretty strong focus on relief programs and sort of helping folks navigate the immediate steps they might want to take to position themselves to last through this difficult time. And now with some recent announcements from the provincial government and a gradual and progressive reopening, a picture of how things might look in the future starting to emerge, we're turning our focus a bit more to perhaps a more optimistic note around what this reopening might look like and how companies are starting to navigate that and prepare for operations in what is likely to be a new normal, and a new normal for quite a long time, it would seem. We're an all-volunteer initiative, so everybody that's making this go, everyone that's investing in the infrastructure and the marketing, and everyone that's volunteering their time as a panelist or a contributor, have all volunteered their time, which is really wonderful and at the best of times, but is particularly special, I think, in the time where all of these folks are running their own businesses and really have their hands full with the challenges that they're working through in their own organizations. So we're very appreciative of that. And finally, we have one singular goal, and that is to help businesses navigate the challenge. So there's really no agenda set with any of this. It's purely an exercise to try to connect folks with information that they might find useful or perspective they might find useful. And to that end, it really only works as an exercise the more folks find value in it. So as long as we keep having strong attendance, and we have a great turnout again today, we'll keep doing these things. But more importantly, anything that you folks can do out there in the internets to connect us with folks that are operating businesses that might find these sessions valuable and get the word out to them, that's something that helps us a great deal, because the reality of it is there's many businesses out there that aren't connected to some of the traditional ways that we would reach them, and we want to get to know those folks and hopefully lend them a hand. Also, these sessions tend to work much better with greater audience participation. We have 25 people in attendance at the moment. That's a fairly intimate group. So there's a real interesting opportunity here to get lots of questions in for the panel. We'll talk a little bit about the tech behind that and how you can get those questions in a moment. But the more this can be shaped by questions from the group, the better off the conversation will be. So we look forward to your questions today. We have a great panel lined up for you, as I said a moment ago. I mentioned earlier our community partners that help make this thing a reality. Obviously, our organization, Ascent Strategy. We're also joined by the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District, Economic Development Regina, Path Co-work, and the Regina Warehouse District. So we're really grateful to have these partners that help us connect with a wider audience. Let's do a quick review of today's agenda. As I mentioned earlier, we have a bit of a modified format today. So those of you who typically tune in for the Craig Reed, Jeff Boutilier Relief Program Rundown may find yourself slightly disappointed by today's programming. But we view it as a bit of a positive. There haven't really been a lot of developments in the relief program world since our session last week. So the information in last week's session, which is available online at resilienceseries.com for review, remains accurate. There was a really meaty discussion with Craig and a lot of detail for folks that we would encourage you to consider if you're still working to access those programs. But when I said it's sort of a positive from our vantage point, I think it's a reflection of the fact that a lot of these programs have finally stabilized. We finally do have a lot of the detail that was elusive or murky for a very long time. Applications for all of the programs are now live, with the exception of the rent relief program, which is still sort of falling into place. And I think people are starting to see some of those benefits hitting the bank accounts, and the wage subsidy should be hitting folks' accounts this week, the first tranche of funding. So some exciting things there for small businesses in particular, and to a lesser extent, some medium-sized businesses who are able to qualify under the program limit. So generally speaking, some good news there. We're going to quickly introduce the Business Resilience Series and mention our upcoming sessions. So we have a session coming up next Tuesday with another great panel. And also we have a special session this week on Thursday, specifically geared to the restaurant hospitality industry. We have a great panel pulled together for that one. We're going to be having an hour discussion with the panel, specifically focused on some of the unique challenges that the restaurant industry faces relative to reopening. And also a really good opportunity, I think, for some of our community partners to hear from folks out there in that industry about what they're experiencing, what some of their concerns are, what they view the gaps as being, so that our partners can use that information when they're advocating to governments and other support agencies on what might be necessary to see businesses through in the long term. So I encourage you to check that out. And again, all the details are available on the series website at resilienceseries.com. We'll introduce our panelists in just a moment here. Throughout the conversation today, we're going to kind of recap the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, which for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to review it, we strongly encourage you to do so. It's a sort of an organic living document, I would say, that is available at saskatchewan.ca. It's a pretty helpful document, and the government, I think, so far has been doing a pretty good job of adding to it as various industries reach out and express that they have some unique concerns or questions about how the new rules might apply to them. On the flip side of that, it's still a plan that I think is deliberately absent of some detail. And the biggest detail that I think people are hoping for clarity on soon are the dates of later phases in the reopen plan. So, you know, phases that would include things like reopening of restaurants and bars and that sort of thing. And I think, you know, obviously it's a prudent approach to hold off on naming specific dates and to watch how things go in terms of case numbers and that sort of thing as we gradually reopen Saskatchewan. But also it drives a lot of questions for folks who are starting to prepare to, you know, get ready for the reopen and are struggling to know what it means for them and what their responsibilities as a business owner might be. So hopefully have a good talk about that today with our panel. And that's the last thing on the agenda today, which is really the main focus of what we'll be doing, which is to have a moderated panel discussion featuring your questions. And I'll talk just about the format for getting those questions in just a moment. Before we get going, the typical disclaimer to protect our esteemed panelists and myself from any of the litigious amongst you. This is a volunteer effort to provide the community with information analysis and access to expert opinion at no cost. New information, as everyone out there understands, is coming out daily. The situation's rapidly evolving and every business situation is going to be very different. This webinar series and any recordings thereof is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice, and no user out there should act on the basis of any material in this webinar without obtaining professional advice specific to their situation. So now that we've covered off the lawyers and kept them happy, let's get underway. So I'm going to start by introducing our panel, and I'll ask them all to unmute themselves now. And once I introduce them, I'll have them just give us a little bit of a overview of their organization and their role within it. And then we'll start asking them some great questions about their experiences like so far through COVID-19. So first off, we're delighted to be joined by Leeanne Croft, who's an architect and principal at 1080 Architecture Planning and Interiors, who, if you're unfamiliar with their work, have produced some of the most beautiful spaces in Regina. And I hope someday to be successful enough that they can do a space for us, because it would be pretty sweet. So good morning, Leeanne, and if you could share with us a little bit about 1080, that'd be great.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. Well, 1080 is a relatively new collaboration that arose from the amalgamation of two legacy firms. So we actually just celebrated our 2-year anniversary yesterday, so that was exciting for us. It was a virtual happy hour that we did with the office, and we had a lot of Rebellion beer that was delivered to each of our staff, so that was a fun celebration. But we are, as you said, an architecture and interior design firm. We do a lot of planning. We do a lot of work that's really routed in the business case first, and then have the resulting space really grounded in that business case. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us, and looking forward to hearing about your experiences in this pandemic situation this morning. Our second panelist is Mark Heise from Rebellion Brewing, a familiar face around town and now on the national stage. Mark has always been a very strong advocate for Regina businesses and the Saskatchewan craft beer scene. and the Warehouse District and the city in general. And it's been nice to see Mark being called upon for that same perspective on a larger stage through the pandemic. So Mark, thanks for joining us, and for the people out there that are unfamiliar with Rebellion at this point, maybe introduce the company.
Yeah, I'm Mark Heise. I'm president and CEO of Rebellion Brewing, also a part owner. There's 4 of us that own Rebellion. Been a lot of fun. 6 years in business. We make beer. We only sell it in Saskatchewan. We think that's pretty awesome. And yeah, what else do I do? I'm also chair of the board for the Warehouse District. So cool to see that we're part of this event. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with everything we're involved in. Even on Rebellion, I saw people posting pictures of us delivering hand sanitizer to the YWCA. I had no idea we were doing that, but that's pretty cool. And now I'm also president of the Saskatchewan Craft Brewers Association and a board member of the Canadian Craft Brewers Association. So I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I seem to have my hands in a lot of different things right now, and it's I guess it's fun. It's incredibly stressful, but also kind of fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Good to have you here this morning. And rounding out the panel is Derek Verhelst, the president of Kelln Solar, a solar company that's been doing some really great things and was on sort of the forefront of some of the broader changes going on in that industry. And then right in the middle of that, the pandemic hit. So very interested in how Derek's been managing that. Derek, tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, Kelln Solar, we're a solar company based out of Lumsden. I'm coming up on my 4th year of owning the company. That'll be in early June. I purchased it in 2016 from the original owner. So it would be arguably Saskatchewan's oldest solar company. I think this will be year 36. The records weren't great when I got it, but we have 2 lines of business, grid tie sales, so solar on houses, solar on businesses. And then the second line, being our predominant line, is remote cattle livestock watering systems. So we have a lot of rancher customers across Western Canada. And that's it. I always hate following Mark because his resume is so long compared to mine. But business owner, that's the title on mine.
I should have planned that better. Yeah, I don't like following Mark either.
I wish I was doing cool stuff like solar. We just make beer.
It sounds like there's a collaboration potential there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the panel discussion format here before we dive in. So the biggest thing here, and maybe the takeaway from the last few sessions, is that I know folks out there have questions because we get them after the session quite often, but we don't see quite as many of them as we would like to see during the session. So ask those questions. Now you might be asking yourself, how do I do that? There's a couple of different ways that you can access questions. The easiest one is the Q&A function through Zoom. So if you're new to Zoom, sometimes you have to give your mouse a little wiggle to get the menu to appear. But if you do that, you'll see that there's a Q&A icon. It looks like 2 comic book talkie bubbles. And if you click on that, it'll bring up an opportunity for you to submit a question, and then we can kind of keep track of that as the panel's chatting. One of their comments might prompt you to think of a question that's been on your mind and get it in there, and we'll come back to that at an appropriate time. And we've been able to get basically every single question we've had from the audience fielded during the time we have together. So by all means, get them in. I think it's really quite valuable to have folks in businesses that, ordinarily I would love to pick these folks' brains about what they're doing in their businesses, and that's not just an opportunity that comes along very often. So we're really grateful for that today. So let's make sure we take good advantage of it. Now, in terms of the panel format itself, we're going to be talking about 3 major topics today, and we'll loop back to this slide from time to time to remind our panelists of where we're at in the discussion. But the goal here is to keep things fairly informal and let the conversation go where it will, and allow our panelists to share whatever insights they feel might be relevant to folks out there, and let the audience ask whatever questions are of interest. But there's 3 things that I know are on a lot of folks' mind right now. Firstly, I think people are still very interested in understanding the journey so far that folks have experienced. Depending on when you were really hit by this, we're about 50 days into this, if you can believe it. I think we've maybe gotten over the initial shock, at least I hope most of us have, and have now sort of accepted this strange new reality and are all coping with, working from home and kids interrupting webinars and all that good stuff. And at the same time, trying to keep the boat afloat and in some cases even grow the boat and stay on track. I know we've heard from lots of folks in our last number of sessions that in a lot of ways, the beginning of 2020 felt like a good year. It felt like we were maybe starting to see some of the weakness in the economy fade away and getting back to a good place. And then we were hit by this. So it's really interesting to hear how other people are grappling with that and what their experience has been, and importantly, what insights folks have realized or what mistakes they've made that perhaps others could benefit from avoiding. The second topic we want to chat with our panelists about today are perspectives on reopen Saskatchewan and plans to operate in a new normal. Now, when we say sort of perspectives on reopen Saskatchewan, I suppose we're not really limiting ourselves to specifically the provincial government's plan. So, I mean, it's great that the government has a plan. The feedback on that plan, I think, has been pretty good. I certainly don't envy the government's position. I think developing a plan to reopen after a pandemic seems like something that you couldn't possibly get right in everybody's opinion. So a real tricky task for them. But I think beyond the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, there's the plans that businesses are developing on their own and the challenges businesses are making to balance the risks associated with reopening with their desire to reopen, and the projections around what the impact's going to be on the demand side of the house for their services as things reopen, and how excited people are going to be about getting back out there. So if Mark opens his tap room back up in June sometime, I know I'm really curious about what his thoughts are on whether or not people are going to come back quickly, or if that's going to look different, and even if it makes sense to reopen his tap room at 50% capacity. So those sorts of questions are what everyone's grappling with out there, and I think our panel's going to have some real interesting insights. And the last thing that I'm hoping our panel can share with us is their thoughts on what's going to be necessary in the longer term to support businesses through this. So I mentioned in my earlier comments that we're at this nice point with relief programs where we don't really have to speculate about how the government's going to implement the details of a particular program that they've announced, and things have sort of stabilized. But the flip side of that is that a vast majority of the programs that are out there end at the end of May or end at the end of June, if it's the rent program. And there's not a lot of clarity right now about whether or not any of those programs will be renewed, and there's certainly not a lot of clarity around how much additional capital businesses might be able to access in the longer term, or supports to sort of offset any of these longer, more structural changes to the economy that we may observe. So I'm very interested in our panel sharing their thoughts on how long the recovery might take, what it might look like, and what kind of supports might be needed, and perhaps how different they might look from the supports we have today. So those are our major topics that I'm hoping to cover off. Probably have about 90 minutes with our team, maybe 70 minutes left. And so let's sort of kick it off right away with some chat about the journey so far. I got some questions to sort of start us off. If you'll bear with me for a quick second while I reconfigure my screens here. So I'm curious, and maybe we'll start, LeeAnn, with you. Let's talk about the situation so far. So as I mentioned, we're 50 days in. There's been some major impacts to business and society. A lot of programs have been rolled out to support businesses. Some have worked well for some businesses. Other businesses have not been able to access those things. Just tell us a little bit about what the impact's been to your business, which I know is in a big growth phase when all this hit, and how you're sort of navigating things so far, and if you're still operating, and if so, how that looks, and sort of what you've learned in sort of responding to this challenge so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are continuing to operate at full capacity, that albeit with everybody at home, save for probably about 3 or 4 people currently working in the office. For us, I mean, we're in a situation where we had a few of our bigger projects put on hold, a lot of caution on the part of clients. But at the same time, because of the nature of a lot of the projects, they were able to continue if they were in a planning or design phase, because people tend to work in on their part of a project in a very dedicated, focused way. And so we've really made use of Zoom and Teams and all the collaborative tools. So I think the biggest shift for us was moving and taking advantage of technology very quickly. And that's, I think, really transformed a lot of what we're doing. We were able to take a lot of our community engagement, stakeholder engagement online. people were really comfortable testing out new equipment, new technology, and just saying, okay, well, we're making the best of this, and really being agile about how to approach the situation. So we've been in a position where we've been lucky, and that the technology that was at our fingertips was able to support us. So that was a really good thing. But I think in general for the business, we're being cautious because we're not sure how long this will go on for, what that will mean for the construction industry. If there is another wave that hits, does that mean we have to retract again? I think there's optimism right now in terms of people going back, and we are seeing tenders go out. We are seeing things active. Obviously, it's changed what things look like on construction sites in terms of physical distancing. But in general, things are able to proceed in a cautious manner.
Excellent. I'm just curious, by way of follow-up, you mentioned that a lot of your customer interactions and stakeholder engagement type work has moved online. In our business, we deal with a sort of similar set of services and challenges in terms of engaging folks. I'm curious, have you found that has translated well to the virtual realm? I know we sometimes lament that we're losing a little bit of the magic sometimes, it feels like. What's your experience been?
Well, there's nothing that can replace that face-to-face time. When the ones that we've taken into larger group formats, we're engaging with 40 or 50 people. We're doing a presentation, and we're able to record the presentation similarly to how you're doing the webinar. We're using the chat function. We're able to respond actually in real time, very similar to this format where people are putting in questions, we're able to address it. So I think we're making the best of the situation. It's different than what you would be doing in a group setting where you're able to work together in tables. There's less of that actual engagement on a piece of paper sketching together. But for the most part, actually, we've had very good feedback. It's some of the school projects that we're doing right now. We're engaging with teachers and parents and students, and we've had very good feedback from them in terms of just being able to access the what we're showing. And some people are finding it very valuable to have access to the recordings after the fact as well.
Excellent, excellent. And shifting gears a little bit to a business that's a little harder to operate remotely or virtually, Mark, what's your experience been? I mean, fortunately, I've always sort of assumed that beer was largely pandemic proof, and if anything, my consumption's gone way up. So maybe tell us a little bit about what your experience has been.
Yeah, again, I think I'm obviously in an industry that's very fortunate for that. Even when we decided to first open the brewery, we were always thinking about resiliency and stuff like that. And so you looked at even like the economic crash in 2008. We looked to that, and craft beer consumption actually increased. There was a real concern at that point that would have been the end of craft beer, and people would have gone back to really low cost, low brand value stuff. And that didn't happen. And we're seeing that again here now, which is thankfully fantastic. But obviously there's still a ton of problems that that are happening in our industry right now. I just sent out a press release last Friday. It went out nationally as well as in Saskatchewan. So there was a Canadian survey done on breweries. And then there's also broken down stats for Saskatchewan. They were pretty much the same, which was interesting. So just to put in perspective, even though people are still consuming beer, maybe some are consuming more beer, about 2/3 of staff across Canada at breweries and in Saskatchewan have been laid off. So that's not great. And we're super proud of all the things that people have done to pivot. Obviously, hand sanitizer has become a huge thing. We partnered with Outlaw Trail Spirits here in Verhelst District to do our brand of hand sanitizer. I stopped in there yesterday. They've never been busier. They're actually sleeping at the distillery. They live out of town in a cottage. They've never been busier. I mean, that's crazy. And and we've also created home delivery. We partnered up with Pile of Bones and District Brewing and Local and Fresh are all offering home delivery services, which has been fantastic. But the challenge with that is so we're still moving beer, but there's not necessarily profit or as much cash, of course, as if you were serving someone a pint of beer in your tap room. So that's when you get into the real nitty gritty of the finances and your margins and all of that, and it's not great. So we don't like to have a pity party We like to tell a good story, and it's been phenomenal to see people really through this whole crisis, not just beer, but everything, is really understanding, supporting community, supporting local. That's been huge, but it's still not great. And you know, if you talk to the restaurant folks, they'll tell you the same thing. They've never been busier, but that doesn't mean they have money. It doesn't mean they can afford their rent or their power. So it's kind of that. I don't know. I don't you say it's the yin and the yang or something, but you know, when I said earlier how I'm having a ton of fun. It's been I kind of thrive in this, but man, it's hard on whether you thrive in it or not. It's mentally and physically exhausting and stressful, and terrifying. Yeah, I could go on forever, but I'll just probably end there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it kind of succinctly. I like your angle that, you know, you thrive in this stuff. That's sort of how it is at our shop as well. You know, on some level, you know, we help folks solve challenges. This is a really big challenge, so it's, you know, great from a intellectual process, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the average human, no matter how much they thrive in this, is designed to endure it for a year or however long it might be.
Yeah, and that's where I think, you know, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to. And again, not that I'm not great at it. I do have I'm not big on education and certifications, but I somehow got a certification in change management when I was still working in government. But I do know that my personality trait is kind of geared towards that, towards change and accepting change. So when you said that we're about 50 days in, after about one day, again, not that I'm, you know, I have like a crystal ball. I could see where this was going. I could see what was going to happen. I personally made a lot of really quick calls, a lot of really quick decisions on my rent, on deferring loans, all that stuff. I had all that wrapped up within probably the first 3 days. Not that that took care of all of my problems, but you know, I think a lot of other folks, it took a little longer to really wrap their heads around it. So I'm personally fortunate that I was able to do that. It doesn't make it any easier though.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Derek, how about you? I mean, like, there've been lots of changes in your industry. I think I mentioned before this all hit. So you were already sort of in that change, adapt, react mode, and then this comes along. So what's the journey been like?
Yeah, I think this would probably be, I don't want to say the third strike, but the third challenge we've faced in sort of the last 4 months, like back in September when SaskPower changed the net metering program. And there used to be a rebate, used to be one-to-one net metering. And they basically took the rebate away and made the rebate half to one kind of thing, and really decimated the economics of grid tie solar. And so that was our first big change, and we were still going to do grid tie solar. We still had interest. We were going to focus on livestock though, because that's our bread and butter. And then we had that awkward fall where it was hot and cold and wet, and our livestock customers didn't show up like they normally showed up, because they were busy harvesting instead of dealing with their cattle, and we've seen that before, so it wasn't a shock, but it was sort of number two. And then third thing comes along is the pandemic. So the good news about the first two is that I had realized I was going to need financing, like Mark had mentioned, kind of the dollars and cents side of it. So I had already applied for my loan from BDC prior to this and got approved, so I didn't have to worry about the wait times that COVID-19 brought along. So that was nice. And now going forward, so that's kind of been the journey so far. Is we're getting more interest in grid tie now.
Oh, I think we're losing Derek a little bit. Was that just happening for me? I think, you know, it's an unfortunate cruelty of Zoom calls. It always freeze frames on an unfortunate pose.
Yeah.
Sorry, Derek, we lost you a little bit there. The kids are probably on Netflix or something. We lost you there for a moment. Just
one's for sure on YouTube. I don't know about the other one. I think he's still sleeping, but yeah. Yeah. So I don't know where you had the financing in place, so that was a bit of a relief to help get through this. We're seeing our people interested in grid tie solar again. The normal has been reset. The one analogy is that I've heard is you used to fly with free check bags, and then it became $25 a check bag, and people got upset at it. Now you just expect $25, and I think that's slowly happening in grid tie. You used to get a rebate, now you don't, and people are going, well, if I want grid tie solar, I'm gonna take the rebate. So or I'm gonna take it without the rebate. So we're seeing that interest pick up. My biggest concern now, and I think maybe I'll talk about it a little bit, is just with COVID-19 shutting down beef plants. I just read an article yesterday that the cattle industry has lost $900 million in value over the last 2 weeks, and that's our bread and butter. So if those guys don't have money to spend and grid tie sales are slower, I don't think I'm personally or work at Council out of in the clear yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Mark, I don't know to the extent this would apply to you, but certainly Leeanne, it seems like your business would be structured this way. Ours is, the initial 3-month impact that a lot of folks have felt really hard, especially in, restaurants and bars and that sort of stuff. Many of us in the service industry, I think, are starting to worry a little bit about more of that echo effect. We rely on, the customers of our customers, I suppose, to generate the revenue that ultimately powers our businesses. And it's going to be really interesting and a little bit terrifying to see how those trickle down over the next 3 to 6 months. Leeanne, did you want to comment on it?
Yeah, I exactly agree with that. I think we're really looking at what the overall economy is going to be doing 3 to 6 months out. And so, from the construction industry side, we're hearing that there are some plans in terms of stimulus spending on infrastructure, on construction projects. So that helps us to be really optimistic about what happens in our industry. And there is a ripple effect with that as well. We know that the construction industry keeps many other industries going as well, and is generally good for the economy. So, that's the type of thing we're really looking to the federal government to start to announce, are those types of things related to, those bigger projects that may have been on hold, or they may be looking to advance some of those infrastructure dollars that were expected later on.
And I want to kind of come back to that when we start talking about the recovery, because you hit the nail on the head. Federal governments have traditionally turned to big infrastructure projects in times of crisis to sort of reboot the economy. And certainly there's some indication that that's a path that they were looking to go down as well, but still no announcements yet. But reflecting on some of the more immediate challenges you folks have dealt with in this initial 50-day period, what would you say the most difficult challenge has been? And what's the unmet need in your business right now that you're still sort of losing sleep over or concerned about in this sort of present phase of, I guess that they're calling it sort of the end of the beginning, which I think is probably pretty accurate. Who wants to share with me sort of what the biggest challenge has been?
I think staffing has been the biggest challenge for us. We were able to stay open because being an ag, we were an essential service, and we had proper physical distancing at our shop. But it's still the people impact. Yes, there's a wage subsidy, but that's sort of retroactive. And how do you reassure your people that they're going to have that you're doing everything you can, that they're going to have a job? We don't have a recurring customer base. We're not a subscription model. It's kind of, we have repeat customers, don't get me wrong, but we can't count on them. So it was trying to think about them and making sure they have, you're going to be able to provide for them while, not putting your company into bankruptcy or incurring personal problems because of it.
Leeanne, Mark, has it been the same for you? Has it been on the staffing side, and what's that looked like in your businesses?
I'll jump in for us. I mean, we had a stable sort of work stream, setting out that, first 1 to 3 months, but it's the uncertainty going forward that I think is what keeps me, cautious and a little bit up at night, because just knowing what's going to be able to continue and what things are going to be stopped or delayed based on economic situations of our clients. So that's really, it's the uncertainty, not knowing how long it's going to last or what that's going to be doing to our client base.
And that uncertainty, I mean, how's that manifesting itself in your teams? Are they sort of grinning and bearing it, so to speak, and putting on a strong face? I know that's certainly been my team. I think we've been able to keep everybody so far, and everybody's hopeful that that'll remain the case. But I'm sure people are worried about it when they look at mortgages and that sort of thing. What's the experience been like on at 1080?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that grin and bear it. Everyone is in this together, and I think the team has been really resilient that way, really adaptable, and we're grateful to our whole staff for how quickly they've adjusted to deploying at home very quickly, almost overnight. But I think everyone feels that, and it's I think starting to wear on people at this point. What does that mean? And we're trying to provide as much certainty from the leadership level as we can, but without a crystal ball, it's hard to say.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, I mean, on your side, with the tap room, certainly a big part of your community and a big part of your business basically shut down in a matter of days. I mean, I know a lot of the folks that work there, and presumably you tried to redeploy a few, but I'm imagining you've had to go through some difficult choices.
Yeah, so we had we laid off about 10 or 13 employees. A lot of them are part-time, but still, I mean, they count on that. Some of them are full-time. So that was definitely not a fun day. Yeah, I would say in general for that one is how do we, I don't want to, yeah, I usually use the term reaching the end consumer. And obviously, that face-to-face in-person type thing, when they come into our tap room, they get to experience that. That's, obviously you can drink a beer. You don't need to have somebody in front of you, but there's more that we've always built our whole business around. It's more than just drinking a beer. It's an experience. We have a lot of people that go out and do tastings in stores, at the liquor stores, and at all sorts of festivals and events and fundraisers. I have 2 staff that literally, we do all of our planning in January, February, March. They had planned out 6 months of events and, working the Cathedral Arts Festival or what, on and on. I mean, we had a bazillion of them. And they had them all plastered on the wall and a huge calendar, and you literally just throw that all out. And, that's fine. And, that's not fun, but I can turn on a dime and do that. But, it's still tough for even just an individual that put all that time and effort into that. And it's okay, well, just forget that. And now you're just going this direction. So yeah, I think I would just circle back to what LeeAnn was saying about just the mental toll on everybody, whether that's just, your whatever you've been working on is now doesn't even exist. Whether it's following the media, whether it's concern about friends and family, whether it's the economy, add it up, right? It's exhausting for business owners and just everyone in general. And you see it on social media. You see people getting agitated, getting angsty. I don't know. I think you're going to start seeing more and more of that, because this isn't the end. We're just moving on to the next stage of this. And so I think to me, that's the one I focus on the most. I'm trying to keep my staff as positive and as focused as possible while still being lenient. Everyone has their moments when they got to break down and cry, or they just can't make it in that day. Or even maybe myself, maybe just had one too many beers the night before, just because, right? And it happens, but you got to still show up and be there the next day. So that's the real tough one that I try to focus on the most. That's me.
And just building on that, Mark, what would you say right now at this phase of the process is the biggest unmet need you have, or have the programs and the various initiatives you've undertaken on your own been enough to kind of get you to where you need to be?
Yeah, I mean, we're stable. And I think, again, beer is somewhat resilient. People are always going to drink beer, but it's still hard to really predict what's going to happen long term. It's and as things do change and shift, if they do open up bars and restaurants, what is that going to mean? Is it worth the squeeze? Is it worth the effort? All of that type of stuff. And so, yeah, people are kind of, oh, well, this is the new normal. Well, the new normal is going to change in the next 2 weeks, the next 6 weeks, the next 6 months. So don't get too comfortable, nor should we be assuming that, and I don't want to pick apart on the name, but, well, we've reopened Saskatchewan, so, let's just get back at her and, look forward to going to the Rider games, right? I don't think that's happening. I don't want to put words in the Riders' mouths, but I don't think that's a reality. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the Riders as an example. We had that question at our panel last week, and we had some folks that I'm pretty sure a few of them were pretty diehard rider fans. We had one whose business is, I think, a fairly significant sponsor of the riders, and the question came in, will we have a rider season this year? And they were fairly unanimous that they didn't expect to see that happen, which I think was an interesting contrast to the pictures of folks at Wascana Lake that weekend, maybe not social distancing the way that they wanted to. And I think it's fair to say there's a lot of mixed perspective right now on what's likely to actually transpire. So maybe let's actually just shift gears into that reopening a little bit, because I think it's kind of an interesting challenge right now. So everybody's talking about reopening. I really like your observation about the naming of the plan being a bit tricky, because there's a lot of armchair psychology at play here, where I think people are pent up and tied up in their houses and tired of being locked in with their families, and they hear what they want to hear. So I think they heard reopen, and they heard a little nugget about golf courses maybe, and their brain did some calculus behind the scenes, and they interpreted that, I think, perhaps a little bit more loosely than the government had perhaps intended. So what are folks' sort of immediate reaction to this idea of reopening, and how are you folks in your businesses sort of going through this intellectual exercise of balancing off the risk and the opportunity? So, I mean, speaking for my business, I miss my team. We're all very excited to get back in the office. We want to get back to work. We do better work when we're together. Of course, that's why we're a team in the first place. But we're also sort of starting to look down the line a little bit and say, well, working remotely for us is actually going pretty well, and we're able to do it. We're very lucky. What's the rush? What's the risk that we're contributing to ourselves and maybe society more generally, and how does that shape our decisions? So I'm curious how you folks are dealing with that. And maybe Derek, maybe start with you, because I mean, presumably you're not unlike Mark in the sense that for you guys to be out there making money, you got to be in the field installing things and sort of doing the work. You can't just zoom in and tell someone how to set this thing up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we're fortunate that we have a dealer network across Western Canada that do direct sales to our customers, and so far they're individuals that can install the system. It's not a group doing the livestock stuff, and again, that's our busiest part right now. So they've been able to sort of continue and put in place their own social distancing and reopen guidelines. So in that aspect, we're impacted by Alberta's plans a little bit, which came out the other day, and Manitoba's, because those three prairie provinces are kind of our biggest areas, our biggest customers. The construction where we're installing grid tie sales, that's trickier, because you can't be 6 feet apart. So it's getting masks if we get some of those sales, and having the sanitizer and all the steps that are outlined in the Reopen Saskatchewan plan, which I think they did a very good job of laying out what you need to do to be open. So for us, like, we've got our door's not locked, but we've got the sign up, and we've always shipped, so we're just shipping more or less. Customers are picking up, but in the summer, the pickup, when customers pick up, is when we can sell sort of our value add stuff to them, and that's going to be missing for us. But the Reopen plan allows them to pick up, and we've got a small shop, and we just have to kind of keep that social distancing guidelines in place, only one person in the shop at a time, and that sort of thing.
Are you experiencing any sort of concern from your staff or your network about that? I mean, we've observed from some of our clients, and some of the feedback we get from folks is, it's kind of a third. There's a third of folks that are maybe a little bit too eager to get back and aren't taking this seriously at all. There's a third that are maybe excessively paranoid, and even when there's a lot of evidence to suggest it's safe to go back, will be very reluctant to do so. And then there's the third that's kind of in between. I'm curious if, when you can't social distance and you got to go install these things and you're on job sites, are you getting any concern from your team, and what are you doing to navigate that?
So far, the team has been really good about it. They've taken it upon themselves to do the cleaning and prepare, before. I wouldn't say before I had a plan, but before they basically came up with their own plan and said, this is how we're going to manage it in the shop. I have one younger employee with a young family and a wife with asthma, so he's capable of working from home. He's our engineer, so he's been working from home, but he's gone on the job site and and hasn't had an issue with it. So I think I've probably got, you know, even of my staff, I've probably got the 1/3 that are sort of in between. They're cautious but not scared. So I guess I feel fortunate that way, that that's their attitude towards this, and no one wants unnecessary risk, but they understand that with proper precautions, we can safely do our job.
And you know, Mark, how does that translate into your business? And I'm kind of want to add a layer to it. I mean, you're in a business, you know, Derek will have folks come into the shop, LeeAnn has folks come in for meetings. I'm sure we're the same way, but we can kind of still do business and limit that and be pretty finicky about how we approach that. You know, if you open up the tap room tomorrow, you've got your employees you have to worry about, and them following the rules and their comfort levels. And then you bring in a bunch of folks that are going to be, you know, drinking beer and are used to being quite social. As a business owner, how are you kind of planning to navigate that or work through that when someone comes in and, you know, is not following the rules or doesn't want to play ball? Like, how does that look going forward?
Yeah, so even on Saturday, I just happened to be in the tap room, and we only allow 2 customers in at a time, and one person decided to stand in the vestibule, and we asked him to not stand in the vestibule so that the 2 customers could leave. We had to ask him twice. He got upset and stomped out. So that was a pretty direct response to seeing that some folks don't, you know, that 1/3 of people that just don't want to comply and feel like, you know, they want to be a part of this, which is, it's unfortunate, but there you go. So yeah, you start thinking about that if you actually have people coming in for pints of beer, this or that. Yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't even really come up with a plan yet. As much as we would love to have people coming in and sitting down and enjoying beer, even on our patio, I'm really in no rush to do that. I've been watching other bars and restaurants and breweries across North America where their jurisdictions have allowed them to open, and the majority of the breweries that I follow are just saying, no, we're not opening. We're not cool with that. And you know, especially for us, we do a lot of distribution of our products as it is. So it's a real tough one to wrap your head around, right? Just with people using your washrooms, this or that. I was even reading an article yesterday talking about, obviously we didn't sell a single keg of beer last month. We normally sell, I don't know, 400, 500. But an article I was reading yesterday was, are people even going to want draft beer if they go to a restaurant? They may want a can of beer that you bring to the table and you wipe it down with a Lysol wipe or whatever, and then hand it over to the customer. So that's very, very different. So man, like that's where, you know, when you start getting into the nitty gritty for anyone, right? The real details of how this is going to operate, it's, I don't know. It's not, and it's not doom and gloom. It's just going to be really different.
I'm curious, as things start to be allowed to reopen, what do you expect the impact might be on some of those sort of deferrals or rent arrangements that you've been able to negotiate? Because I know some businesses are starting to worry, you know, hey, we still want to make a choice that's maybe erring on the side of caution a little bit more than maybe the government's plan from a what you're legally allowed to do standpoint. And I'm a little worried now that my landlord is going to maybe put a lot more pressure on me to be open if I'm allowed to be open, just using that as an example. What are your thoughts on that, and what that might mean for the sort of broader group of small businesses that are going to be in a position to start operations again here, let's say in June or July?
I would just say really quickly on that, what I've always said, I've been fortunate enough to have some of the government's ear on some of this stuff. And so we appreciate a lot of the deferrals and this and that in the programs, but a lot of that, you're just kicking the problem down the road. So that doesn't make it go away. And that's where I say it's great that we've reopened Saskatchewan. But the reality is that we're probably going to we're just moving into another phase of this that's going to come with its own batch of problems that are going to need to be dealt with. And people will see that right away. Government's not naive. They see what comes in for tax revenue. You know, it's real easy to measure those things. And we just have to have the faith and the confidence that they'll respond accordingly, right?
It was actually interesting this morning. The headlines were that the federal government's already spent something like $250 billion on programs already, which is a pretty remarkable number when you consider that, yeah, we're only at the end of the beginning, so to speak, and it could be with us for a long time. Leeann, just on this sort of idea of progressive reopening, I'm kind of interested in your perspective from your unique angle as someone who actually helps folks configure space and, you know, implement regulations and OHS concerns and that sort of stuff. In your own business as an office space, I'm quite fascinated how you plan to handle it, because we're in our office space starting to think of, okay, how do we actually do social distancing and stuff? You know, it's funny, we look at our space and we think offhand, this should be really easy, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. But what are you getting, you know, from questions from your clients or folks reaching out and saying, what are even the rules? Because it seems like in some cases it's still kind of the wild, wild west right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, our office is an open studio environment. So we've, you know, tried to have people work together very collaboratively, which is not conducive to social distancing at all. So for us, I mean, we are actually limited, and as most businesses are, by the footprint of your real estate. So, you know, there's only so much space that you have for the number of people that you have working together. And prior to COVID-19, that was a good thing. People collaborated, people had flexible space, people could share spaces in different ways. I think that's really part of the new reality, you know, less of the hoteling idea, less of sort of shared collaborative workspaces where you've got multiple people using different tables and chairs and spaces within an office environment. It's much more difficult to maintain sanitization of those areas on a regular basis if everybody is moving in and out and trying to work together. So that'll be, you know, part of that new reality. You know, I think that for us, it'll be a very slow progression back to everybody working in the office. And you know, frankly, we had outgrown our space, you know, 6 months ago, and we were already with people, you know, in tight quarters, which was fine, but, you know, definitely very difficult to do the physical distancing. So I think we'll be looking at more of a staggered workday potentially, or having people come into the office, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then work from home, you know, the other days. I think that we will be seeing some changes in terms of how much people use technology as part of the new normal. We're hearing from some of our staff that, you know, I actually feel more productive because I have very focused time at my desk. Others, it's very difficult to work at home when your children are there. And for those of us kind of navigating with homeschool, you know, I know every school division and every teacher is handling it a little bit differently, but, you know, we've got 2 kids trying to do their own Zoom calls and team meetings and managing that and maintaining their focus. It's hard to be focused at home. So I think as we can progress back to, you know, some degree of working in the office, it feels really good to, you know, get dressed and go to work. I know I'm in the office for the first time in 2 months here. So it feels good to actually get back to what feels like normal. And I think there's a big part of the psychology around that. It just feels like you're progressing. It feels like you're doing something different than just, you know, getting up and going to a different room in your house and and being on Teams and Zoom meetings all day.
Yeah, the Zoom fatigue is very real. And I might just offer a suggestion. I haven't mastered it yet, but I've been trying to get my 2- and 4-year-old daughters proficient in writing business plans for clients. It hasn't worked out yet, but you might want to look at getting those kids working in the architecture field. It's a good source of low-cost labor. I'm curious on the sanitation side. I mean, that's one that, from an office environment, you mentioned, we're stressed out about it. It's tough to even get the things you might need. I can only imagine in a place that's still seeing significant public traffic that it would be almost a nightmare. I noticed that Mitch Davis, or a friend from Eastside Audiology, mentioned that in their business, they've actually brought in someone additional, it sounds like, to sort of sanitize patient spaces, and presumably their audiology business would have been included in that first phase of the reopening, those you know, therapeutic providers and medical providers that had been forced to close. Obviously, looking at things like that, there's a big cost associated with that. If you're looking at additional help, there's whether or not those folks are appropriately trained, if they know how to protect themselves, whether or not it's even possible to find people within your existing teams that are willing to take on that work, and obviously the cost of materials and the availability of materials. How are folks managing that, and what steps are you taking in your businesses to even secure some of that stuff, or even understand what you're going to need when it does become time to reopen? Not everyone at once. It's hard for people at home to hear.
I think I kind of mentioned, we've been lucky in that we've been able to stay open, and we don't have a large public coming into ours. So little things like, you know, last summer a customer would come in who drove 2 hours to pick something up and would ask to use our washroom. We're not going to let them use the washroom, unfortunately, right? They can go to the gas station or go somewhere that's more better, that is better equipped to handle a customer like that. We used the distillery out of Brownlee to get cases of hand sanitizer for the staff, and then their topical sanitizer as well to keep things sanitized. And every time a guy goes to Walmart, he looks for the Lysol wipes to try and to beef up the stock without hoarding it. And then there's the responsibility of just the staff members to ensure they're wiping down something after they use it, and, or wiping down something before they get it, assuming it wasn't sanitized.
It's definitely a relief to see that some of the supply side issues have sort of resolved themselves, because the optics of a business owner going into Walmart and buying a commercial quantity of Lysol wipes when people just think you're there for your household, it's a difficult look. And it sort of brings me to another question, which is sort of the brand risk optics that folks are contending with right now. So I think a lot of companies that were very quick to work from home or shut down, perhaps before it was more or less required to do so, I think benefited from an optic of some leadership and some community mindedness, and that's quite positive. I think businesses, Mark, like yours, that remain in no rush to reopen will, I think, ultimately in the long term be sort of repaid for that. People have long memories, and I think how people navigate this will be important. But how do you sort of consider, as you look to reopen, the brand sort of market positioning aspect of this, which I think is, not to be cynical, it can't really be understated, where, if I'm a restaurant opening up, or even a retail location opening up, I really don't want to be the source of a new COVID-19 case reported in the media, which sort of is how it's going right now. So how are folks working through that? Are people going to sort of wait and see and let a few people open up and sort of see how it goes, let them be the proverbial canary in the coal mine? Or do you sort of take that risk and confront it head on if, despite your best efforts, someone does become infected, which is very much reality now? I mean, no matter how hard you try, there's still that risk. There's a risk every time you leave your house. How are folks sort of working through that brand calculus?
I would say it's terrifying. Even, like I say, even at our place, we still allow up to 2 customers into the tap room at a time. There's a very small area. There's a cooler where they can grab the beer. I've been terrified since we started that, right? That someone's going to say we're doing it wrong and go on social media or this or that. But it's actually, we've been very fortunate. It's been quite the opposite, that people are telling us they feel very comfortable, they feel very safe, very clean. I think that's the best feedback. And again, I guess I would say to any business owner, you just got to be hyper attentive and be prepared to deal with something. If something does go wrong, own it immediately. So actually, one person did complain that they went to use our debit machine and they had to push the buttons and they said it wasn't clean. And we actually, so what we had been doing was wiping down the debit machine as soon as a customer finished using it. Now we wipe it down before giving it to a customer, so they can actually see that we're wiping it down. That was great feedback. And, and that person posted it on Facebook for everyone to see, but we just owned it and said, thank you very much for the feedback. We always have been cleaning that device, and instead we're going to clean it in front of you. So you just got to be super, super attentive, not getting into any arguments. And I don't know, that's the best thing I can say. I mean, an outbreak ultimately can happen to anyone, anywhere. Man, and again, just own it and try to make the best of the situation if it does happen.
LeeAnn, I'm curious for your view from the office environment, because my understanding of how this works right now, and it is pretty fluid, is that if we were to go back to our space and someone in their travels were unfortunately to contract it, we're back to shut down for 2 full weeks at least, and probably more, and probably looking at some company to come in and clean the place. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, it's really about it's about communication, for our staff. We keep a very good line of communication with everybody. If people are not feeling well, some of it is common sense, don't come in You know, we know that people aren't traveling. You know, people are really staying pretty close to home right now. But I think a lot of the things that are happening, a lot of it is common sense around sanitization, around what you're doing. You realize what are the things that are high touch areas. But I think that what needs to happen as a next step is something that everyone can look to that says these are what you should be doing. So, you know, we work a lot with public health as a client of ours, but you know, it'd be good to have something, a document that people could look and say, these are the protocols that everybody should be following. So it isn't some businesses doing, you know, what they feel are the best things, whereas other businesses are looking and doing other things. It'd be, I think, very helpful to understand what are the minimums that everybody should be doing, and then how can you go above and beyond to protect your staff and your clients. But I think everything comes down to communication and maintaining that line with your staff that, you know, if you aren't feeling good, please stay home. It's not, you know, I'm feeling okay, or I've got a little bit of a sore throat, I'm going to come in because I feel I need to. I think we're going to see a big shift in people really being able to work from home more and taking advantage of that, and really being proactive about not, you know, spreading something around the office, even if it is something minor.
Yeah, I certainly think the days of the guy in the office that never takes a sick day being a hero are probably over. That's a permanent change, I think. There's a question that came in over the Q&A here that's probably in your wheelhouse, and that is like, do you anticipate that folks are going to need to retrofit spaces in a more permanent and lasting way as a result of this, and what might that look like?
I do think that will be likely something that happens in terms of, you know, what becomes our new way of working together. You know, I think the idea that we've gone to these spaces that are very much about open office and collaboration are going to, you know, I think we're going to be looking a little bit differently at that. The idea about hoteling stations, as I was talking about before, I think there's an advantage to that, but there's got to be protocols in place to make sure that that is clean in between people using it. So I think we're going to see a lot more ability to clean spaces. I think the type of materials we're using, we're going to be thinking more and more about what materials harbor viruses and bacteria for a longer amount of time, what is easy to clean, what surfaces are being used, and how can you make sure that they are surfaces that can be sanitized on a regular basis and easily done in between people using them. So I think partly it is about the physical space and the configurations of space, and partly it's about the materials that are used. So I do think that we will see that, but it's difficult with existing space and existing investments. And so how can people use what they have in place currently and adapt to those cleaning practices and reconfiguring so that you can use what you've got, but maintain those distances. As we've seen, you know, grocery stores put up the plexiglass around the cashiers. That's a really, you know, quick, easy retrofit. And starting to think about, you know, how those things translate to office spaces. I think that will be what we start to think about in the future as well.
I'm interested in the design aspect from sort of this question that's come in from the audience earlier around the density of spaces. So there's a question that came in about how McDonald's opened in the Netherlands and they're serving 3 or 4 customers at a time. There's no people involved. It's all automated and hands off, but they're actually using sidewalks outside of the building and that sort of thing. I know on that same sort of concept, there's been lots of talk about some communities turning over closed streets to businesses like Mark's and letting them have, you know, massive patios and using adjacent lot spaces and that sort of thing. What do you sort of think is the longer term implication of some of those choices? And is that something you think we're going to see in Regina, for instance?
My personal opinion is I don't think we can change our streets and our infrastructure to accommodate that. Even in our climate, there's only a certain window that we could even use our outdoor space in that way. But I think it's going to be a big conversation as we look, you know, I think it's going to change how we think about space, how we think about being together in space. You know, I think that it will be a shift in terms of the density of spaces and this, again, the ability to work from, you know, home from sometimes and from your workspace. And looking at what that means from a work week, and how can you make sure that your density of space isn't, overly taxed, and you can maintain that physical space within your office environment.
I would just say it's been really interesting hearing you talk, Leeanne. I've been thinking, when I think about your line of work, I think, oh my, there's going to be all this empty vacant space and you guys will have no work to do. But you're right that the retrofitting and whatnot is going to be, there's going to be a ton of that. I mean, I've gone into a few retailers, and you see stuff draped off, and they're doing what they're doing, but it looks tacky. It is what it is. My tap room is currently full of empty kegs stacked to the roof. It doesn't look proper either. So there's obviously that immediate stuff. There's going to be some interim stuff, and then like there's going to be 5 to 10 years of probably different thinking, whether we can use outdoor space or whatever. But it's just, even I don't know. You know this stuff better than me, but even airflow and stuff like that is going to be a consideration, and filters and all that sort of stuff. I would imagine.
On that point, when we start thinking about reopening, it sort of seems to me that this whole notion of communicating with our customers, or and I think it's really communicating these days. I think marketing has definitely sort of taken a backseat, and rightfully so. But it seems to me that the exercise going forward is going to be twofold. There's going to be some need to explain to consumers that you're still out there and your product is still something that makes sense in the context of their lives. So, Derek, your business is a great example of that. There's cattle farmers out there that even if they're having difficult times, your solution might be able to help them with their margins, et cetera, right? So there's still some sort of communication that needs to happen, but then there's probably also this new level of communication around helping educate customers about whether or not your space is truly going to be safe for them. And it seems to me that because everyone's going to be at differing levels of success and sophistication in doing so, that's going to emerge as kind of a new differentiator for some businesses. So if I'm, Mark's Tap Room, I might be doing the best job in town of creating a safe space once it's time to open. And I'm going to have to go do some work to explain that to the general public, because they might not immediately know that and might need some comfort to understand that. How are you guys going to approach that and making people feel, when it is safe, not rushing it, but when it is safe, help people understand the measures you're taking? And do you think that becomes sort of a competitive factor? Competitive is probably the wrong word, but you sort of get the sense of what I'm driving at. I'm curious for your thoughts on that. Mark, maybe we'll start with you. I think your business is probably the most obvious example of it, but I think Derek, a pretty strong argument for yours as well.
Yeah, I would just say, from a really big, I always am thinking about branding and marketing. We've worked really hard to build a brand that people can trust and that is transparent. And that's where I think people kind of fill in the blanks. Like I say, people came into our tap room. I'm not saying we were slack, but I don't feel like we were experts either. We just did what we thought was necessary. And people were like, wow, you guys are super clean. You guys are awesome. I feel comfortable coming here. I think a lot of that comes back to that brand and reputation. And if it's true and it's real, people are willing to give you a chance. If you're maybe a little, I don't know, unscrupulous, or maybe, you are what you are, I don't know. Right? People fill in the gaps. I'm big into psychology and understanding that stuff. And,
I don't know if it can differentiate your business in a positive way, but I think it certainly can be a detriment to your business. If people come in and view it as not prepared, they're likely to tell that story more than, hey, I went into Rebellion and they were super, super clean, right? Like, that's the expectation, is that you're clean. And if you don't meet that expectation, that's what's going to get shared, is how I would be my view on that, Jeff.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. That makes a lot of sense. Perhaps this is just the new, standard price of admission, and a failure to meet it is what's going to differentiate companies more so than meeting it. Leeanne, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, more as a consumer, when I'm going out to the grocery store, I've noticed significant differences between, approaches that different stores are taking. And, I'm definitely making choices based on which ones I'm, perceiving and physically seem to be, cleaner than others. And, it doesn't even matter, if one has access to different, products. I'm going to make the choice based on which one is doing a better job at cleaning and making me feel safe as a consumer. So I think we're going to see more of that going forward, whether that's in restaurants or retail, or potentially even into office spaces. I think there's a big psychological aspect to all of this, where that when you feel safe, you just are feeling better about going in, and you have a better kind of brand association with that company.
I'm curious just on that point. You mentioned the changes in the grocery stores, and Mark, you mentioned responding to your clientele with the different practice with wiping down the pin pad. Does anybody foresee a world in the future where plexiglass barriers at grocery stores come down and where we're not wiping pin pads down anymore?
I don't know.
Well, for me, I don't know about the plexiglass barriers. I hope that isn't our reality, that we have a physical barrier between people, long term. I don't think that's something that anyone wants to see. But I think sanitization is a good thing, and I think the more we can bring that into our everyday practice, that's always going to be a good thing. So I think if we can get back to our face-to-face conversations, but with more sanitization just generally happening, I think that's a good thing for every industry.
Yeah, I'm naive. I'm still hopeful that this will result in more men washing their hands in the restroom, but I'm somewhat skeptical that that'll be a lasting improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I would say, again, I would, even just the practice of wearing masks, again, that's been a very common thing in Asian culture. And I think, for a lot of folks in North America, we've always thought that's kind of weird and odd. I think that's going to become more of a normal thing when you're out in public. I don't see that going away.
Interesting. Derek?
Yeah, I sort of would agree with Mark, and I don't know if we have an end in sight. That's kind of some of the biggest unknown, is like, if there's no vaccine, like how long does this, there's no cases in Saskatchewan, but if that R factor or whatever the health authority talks about is still high, like how can you take those barriers away until there's herd immunity or a vaccine or something to sort of protect ourselves other than social distancing and those measures? I think they have to stay in place until there's something medically that can do it. And yeah, something like a mask, like the next time I go on an airplane, I'll have a mask. Who knows when that is, but that's what's going to happen.
I was just going to say, what an optimistic statement. The next time I go on an airplane, that was like a very hopeful statement. I know I have my wife has sourced us a mask. I have this very fashionable black mask. It looks totally badass. Really excited about it. But unfortunately, I got to say, I wish I had like my eyes done, because I fog up like crazy. It's just terrible. So there are some practical challenges here that need to be worked through. We had a question come in from Linda from Tech Canada, and I should mention that our panelists today are all members of a tech group, and Linda was instrumental in bringing this group together, which was a huge help for me and a great group of folks. She asked how you guys have all been able to stay so true to your brand, and I mean, all three of your businesses are really quite powerful brands and very strong values. And I mean, the proof of that is I don't have a lot of direct engagement with LeeAnn or Derek, but have a very strong sense of your businesses and what you're all about. How have you managed to sort of stay true to that in an environment where I think there are some real practical choices that, if you really looked at things objectively, the best thing from a dollars and cents standpoint might have looked a little bit different than when you ultimately chose to do. Certainly that's been true in our business. I mean, I suppose it probably makes sense to just lay people off immediately and protect the cash flow and all this sort of thing. Obviously, folks here haven't done that, and that means something. How have you done that? And sort of, I guess, a follow-up to the question from Linda, like, what would you like people to sort of know about what that means from your brand standpoint, and why you've chosen to do those things? Who wants to lead off on that one? I'll pick on LeeAnn.
Well, for us, I mean, we pivoted very quickly to move everybody home as well. I think it was the week before everyone was mandated to go home. And we were pretty nimble in that. We tried to be proactive. Like, one of our core values is to be proactive. And so that's something that, we really tried to make sure that we had people set up and could move fairly easily in that way. But even just how we were set up as a company beforehand, we had a really strong base and really good sound financial management. And we were set up so that we could weather the storm for a certain period of time without too much difficulty. So we were really happy to have those things in place. But just being proactive as a company, we're also looking. We've got regular design sessions where we're getting together as a team and brainstorming about ideas that are going to be changing our industry, going to be changing how we work together. And really trying to keep moving forward, looking 3 to 6 months out, optimistically, but cautiously, and really looking at what things are going to be changing. So I think for us, when I look at our overall core values, that's the one that's really been helpful to us here as a team. But also, we really, our business is our people. So as keeping our staff happy, feeling safe, feeling collaborative is such an important thing. So I mean, just keeping people engaged, working in this remote way has been a change for everybody. But, we're doing weekly kind of coffee breaks. We had an MTV Cribs type session where everyone went around and showed everyone their fridges and that type of thing. So just trying to keep things light. We've done a couple of things where we're trying to also support local businesses and, say thank you to our staff for being, because it's not easy for anyone. The few people in the office, like they're a little bit, it's just a completely different environment. So, trying to say thank you by, giving them gift cards to local business to support it. Beer delivery on the weekend so that we could have a happy hour Monday for the birthday, things like that. We're just trying to keep everybody feeling safe, feeling positive, because I think the psychology of it is really, really important long-term as well.
Yeah, it's funny. We had a bit of a virtual reception the other day, tried to do something to make things normal. And on any other day, this thing would have been an unqualified disaster. But people are just so interested in human engagement and something that breaks up the monotony that people's tolerance for creativity and new ideas is very high right now, which is kind of exciting.
Very true.
Mark or Derek, anything to add on the brand value piece? I mean, you both have pretty strong brands. Mark, you're essentially sort of the champion of Regina businesses in a lot of ways right now. Like, how do you stay true to that and do the right thing versus the easy thing?
Yeah, I think, again, for me, I keep saying that I think I'm really lucky that I focused on a lot of things that are really important in a pandemic. Even before we opened the brewery, I didn't necessarily understand brand and vision and values. I just made up what I thought was important and relevant. And I mean, I have the original documents I wrote, a year before we even opened the brewery. And, we were talking about the importance of truly caring about your staff, truly caring about your customers, truly caring about your community. And so it's been kind of overwhelming to go through this. Literally every single one of my staff has come up and told me, they're like, I am so glad I work for Rebellion Brewing right now. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I feel so good. I feel so safe. I feel so proud. Whether they're just blowing smoke up my butt or whatever, but that feels pretty darn good to have your staff tell you that, and it kind of gives you the energy to keep going. And we've heard the same things back from customers and the community at large who basically repeat back things that I've written down. I maybe haven't said them verbally, but we've tried to demonstrate that through our brand and what we stand for. And when people literally repeat back verbatim what I wrote down, 6-7 years ago, that tells me we must be doing a good job of executing on that. So I don't know. It's like I say, we're lucky. We created a podcast over a year ago, and people are like, "Why the heck would a brewery have a podcast? This is a total waste of people's time. This is stupid. You're just telling stories about the community. Nobody cares." It turns out a podcast is really popular when everyone's sitting around with nothing to do and you need a half hour to burn up your time. So our podcast numbers are bonkers, and people think it's really cool that we're just talking about things going on in our community. So sometimes you got to be lucky, is I think what I would say.
Awesome. And yeah, the employees telling you that you're doing well is pretty high praise. And It's probably no surprise that it's easy to write those value statements down, but it's pretty cool and I think powerful for employees when there's a real challenge to those values and leadership steps up and they're more than just words on a page. They really do mean something. So
Yeah,
I think that's a great story.
I would say the one other thing that I know that I deliberately focused on in terms of our outward brand as soon as this happened, and for, I guess, my personal brand, I hate saying that, but I guess I kind of have my own personal brand. And that was to really try to be, think about what type of energy you're putting out there. And I really wanted it to be positive no matter what. I'd say I personally have all sorts of things I would love to rage about and yell and scream about. In fact, just before we started this, I kicked a chair and kicked a garbage can because there's too much garbage in this office right now. And I was trying to but other than me telling you now, I'm not going to do a ranty Facebook post about how my office is a mess and, my staff, blah, 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 right? So anyways, we just made a really deliberate effort of, we're just going to try and keep it light, try and keep it fun, try and keep it somewhat hopeful and positive. And again, I think the feedback I've gotten on it are, again, I'm really nerdy on social media and stats and algorithms. Our numbers have been insane. Again, that tells me it's working, and we're saying something that means something to people right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the relentless positivity is important. It's important when you step on your kid's Lego brick in the middle of the night to remind yourself that it's actually really nice right now to be able to spend all this time with them. Power of positive thinking. Derek, anything to add on the brand piece?
Oh, you put me after Mark again, and he's got such a good story. I mean,
I really keep doing that to you. Sorry, man.
I like to think I care about my employees. They're still there. They're still showing up. So that's positive. Our biggest brand, we're not a huge sales company. So I think that's kind of worked in our favor right now, and that we're not the Herb Tarlick solar company calling people and saying, hey, remember that proposal? You want to spend $25,000 right now in the middle of a pandemic? So I think that's earning us some goodwill because times are tight. You don't want to be hounded. I mean, I personally know I haven't been the biggest fan of people trying to sell to me right now and take advantage of this pandemic. So I don't want to. We've never wanted to be that company, and we're not going to pivot to be that company now just to get more sales. So hopefully people appreciate that and are there in 1 to 3 months, 6 months, whenever, that they feel the time is right to go solar.
Well, that's a good segue to sort of our last question. But before we do, I just want to celebrate that you did just one-up Mark, because if you had asked me who would drop a WKRP reference on this webinar, I would have assumed Mark for sure. And
I was actually 2 days ago, I was listening to a band called the Tarlicks. They're friends of mine. So there is that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we need more WKRP right now, for sure. There's a question that came in, a pretty complicated question around inventory and retail from Dee. I think it's an interesting question, and I'm going to use it as kind of a jumping off point for the last question before I ask you what you think the gaps will be long term. And that's sort of around this idea of demand. So Dee's observed that people really aren't planning much beyond 1 week right now. I think that's true for some businesses. I think others are a little bit more planful and starting to think about how life might look. But I think the thrust of the question here is, if I'm a retailer, I need to make decisions about whether or not I bring in inventory or whether I don't bring in inventory. And that requires businesses, I think, to sort of pick a lane, for lack of a better word. I think most of us are trying to come up with a couple different forecast scenarios, pick the one that we think is most likely to take place, putting on our armchair epidemiology hats and our business hats. And that's tricky. And at the end of the day, there's a probability we'll be right and a probability we'll be wrong. And I think if we're wrong, it's not necessarily a failure of planning. It could just be that some of our assumptions didn't come to pass. But when you consider that sort of challenge in your own businesses, how are you folks thinking about demand right now? And what is sort of that scenario you're planning for? Do we think that life's going to start to get back to normal in another 3 or 4 months? And if so, what does that look like? And if it's not going to get back to normal, how far from normal might it be in terms of the demand that you normally would have seen pre-COVID-19? And how are you planning to adjust to, maybe a lower overall business volume? I mean, certainly in our business, we're looking out there and saying, man, it's going to be soft for a while. I mean, I hope we're wrong, but we better plan for a pretty soft economy. What are the discussions like on your side, and what's kind of that scenario that you've got in your mind right now, if you're willing to share it? Maybe Leeanne, let's come back to you on this one.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we don't really have an inventory issue from a physical goods perspective, but definitely looking at what our workload is going to look like, 6 months from now. That's something that we are looking at really closely. I tend to be a perpetual optimist, so I'm really looking forward and saying, I think that we are going to see some stimulus spending. The government is looking at what they can do to get the economy back up and running. Historically, we've seen that happen in, infrastructure dollar spending. So you were looking, cautiously, but saying, okay, can we plan for a scenario where, it's going to be soft for, the next 3 or 4 months, but beyond that, hopefully there are some projects that are able to go ahead, or new things that are coming out because of that spending. So I tend to be looking in that way, but at the same time we are being cautious and saying, okay, well, what does it look like as a plan B if that isn't the case? So I think it's almost like a 2-track planning. What is our ideal, being optimistic, and then what is our safeguard? So that's sort of the approach that we're taking as a team.
Excellent. Mark or Derek, thoughts from you?
Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, we're managing our inventory a lot closer than we ever had, and we're in touch with our key suppliers to ensure that lead times at their side haven't changed. So if we see a surge in demand, we're able to relay that. And if their lead time changes, then we have to start having harder conversations in the office. That's one thing, going back to the true to our story and our brand, is that we're trying to differentiate from our livestock competitors by always having things in stock and being ready to ship, when I know some of them don't. So we don't want to run that risk of not being able to meet the demand, but also we don't want to be stuck with a whole bunch of summer products come November that we're sitting on for 6 months, because if the economy hasn't changed and cash flow stays tight, I mean, it's a big cost to have sunk costs sitting in your basement that you're not going to realize until April, for example. So.
Absolutely. And with the lead times a lot of folks have on their inventory, I mean, these orders were placed for a normal year long before any of this hit.
Right.
So there's going to be some tricky negotiations with vendors going on, I'm sure, in a lot of businesses. Mark, did you want to add to the demand side? I mean, you're in a pretty affected industry. When do you think things might start looking a little normal?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you have to assume that this is going to be a minimum 2 years of disruption, and it's never gonna, I mean, again, like literally after one day of this, I was telling people, I said, the world we once knew is gone, and a lot of people looked at me like I was insane, and probably some people still do, but it really is. It's going to be different. It's not going to go back to the same. I don't know when I'm getting on a plane again either. I just don't. I would love to, but I don't know when that's happening. But that's okay, and so you have to process that and be okay with that. But any of the business planning I've ever focused on, and if anyone ever asks me to help them with a business plan, I say you need to have a plan A, B, C, and D, and hopefully you never have to use plan D. But I'm able to sleep at night knowing I have those. A real obvious one I can give you is we anticipated we knew that home delivery for beer was going to become a thing, and in fact we've been doing it since day one through Local and Fresh. We knew it was going to be an even bigger thing, more online purchases, and so we had started building a website over a year ago, and we were ready to roll with our own home delivery service. But when some of the other breweries stepped up and said, we're going to do it and we're going to carry everyone's products, I said, great. So I was literally like a weekend away from launching our own home delivery. I had already planned it out. We had built it. It was ready to go. But someone else came along and had a better plan, a better idea. And so fine. And so we scrapped our version of that. That's okay. So what? I at least had the plan. I knew what I was going to do, what I would need to do. Something better came along. So think about that. That just really ties into business resilience. That's a big word and this and that, but doing it is a whole other story. And then just, you got to know your numbers, cash flow management, cash flow projections. Maybe I spend too much time on that, but I usually spend my Sunday mornings going through my numbers from the previous week, what I think is going to happen in the next week. Are we on track for the month? Are we on track for the year? And maybe, like I say, maybe that's obsessive, but I think it's important. You really have to have the finger on the pulse of your organization. I remember 3 or 4 years ago, you guys kind of talked, Derek was talking about, kind of the third strike. I think 3 or 4 years ago, Economic Development Regina asked me to speak in front of the media when the economy had kind of first started that kind of downturn. And I still remember hearing myself on the radio when I was driving home, and I said, everyone's got to sharpen their pencils, which again sounds really vague or sounds really easy, but that's what I'm talking about. Is you got to know your numbers. You can put on your stupid cowboy hat and talk a bunch of garbage, but you gotta know how to take care of business in the back end as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate your point too about plan A through D. When we do plans with businesses all the time, you tell them, and we were saying it at the beginning of COVID, like, you've got to make decisions about at what point you would lay people off, or difficult emotional decisions. You got to decide at what point that happens before any of the emotion is upon you. Like, you got to, cool heads, you got to have that plan and know when to execute on it and what to watch for, so that you're not making emotional or decisions that push you in the wrong direction or hurt the business more later on. So certainly appreciate that comment. There's a couple of questions that have rolled in. We have a couple minutes left, and I want to shift to our last topic. There is one question I wanted to address really quick, which is there was a question around whether or not anyone really understands how this particular pandemic might affect retail. And if I can be so bold, I would probably just strike retail out of that and insert any industry or service or business here. I think the answer is no. I don't think anybody really knows how this is going to play out. I think economists are really struggling to come to terms with how this looks. And you can only look at the 2008 financial crisis or the 1912 pandemic so much because, things are so different now. I mean, we look at 2012 and the big financial crisis, global demand is much stronger heading into this particular crisis than it was in 2012. The economy is very different. If you look at the big pandemic from the early 1900s, the economy wasn't nearly as globalized. It was a very different circumstance. Things were very, very different. So I think everyone's trying to struggle to figure out what this means at every level. And I have a feeling that it won't actually be until 5-10 years from now, when people start looking back at this retrospectively and doing some studies and some academic work, that people will really understand at a macro level what happened in the economy. And the only thing we can do in the meantime is do our best as individual businesses to succeed in whatever unique, strange set of circumstances are thrust upon us, because it's different. Every city's got different rules. Every province has different rules. I think I find some comfort in the fact that in Canada, we've taken a somewhat more prudent approach than our southern neighbors, and we're seeing every day that it's having a pretty devastating effect on their economy, which I know we wish things were different for them, but are grateful that things are a little better here. So, I mean, it's a simple and straightforward question, and the answer is no. And I know that there's a lot of folks out there that are hurting and looking for that sort of silver bullet answer of what is the impact of this going to be, and should I even keep operating? And I think you just got to keep on keeping on until this dust settles, which is kind of an unsatisfactory answer, I'm sure. I want to round out the conversation just with a few minutes left, and I want thoughts from the group on, we've all sort of agreed that this is likely to be a longer and lasting impact than most people had probably hoped when we first left the offices. I think, Mark, to your point, it became pretty evident pretty fast that this was a very serious thing. It was going to have a pretty significant lasting consequence. But when you consider that the programs that are out there right now have only been in place for 3 months and are about to run out, they'll run out at the end of May and the end of June, respectively. What kind of gaps are out there right now, and what sort of needs do you foresee businesses having over the longer term? And if you could give some advice to governments or agencies around what they should be looking at or how they should be considering things going forward, or what you may have observed from their initial efforts that could be improved, what would you say is where they should be focusing right now? Are there gaps? Is more help going to be needed? And if it is, beyond just saying, yeah, we're going to need more help, what kind of help is going to be effective for you folks? So Derek, maybe I'll start off with you, and I'll make Mark go last this time.
I think LeeAnn's really talked about it the most, and the federal government's hinting at it. But it is the economic stimulus, and I think it's right down to the consumer level, not just at the small business level. Like the programs have been great. Would we have survived without them? I hope so, but I know we are going to because of them. But now it's that individual level. And that end customer. I think it was the 2008 when they had the home renovation tax credit of 20%. Like, right? That would help me. A lot of people would probably look at solar again if they got 20% back. So personally, but also I think that just had a great impact on the economy and the amount of people that did a basement reno, and you know, even if that doesn't directly help me, a good economy helps everybody, I think. So that stimulus to get people spending money again and confidence that the economy can build and that we're rolling again is the important factor. And I don't know if it's a 20%. Well, I don't know what that looks like at the federal level or provincial level, but I think it needs to get into any further programs need to get into individuals' pockets and not just small businesses.
Interesting. So a focus on getting the money into the hands of the people. Mark or Leeanne? I think I said Mark, I'd make you go last. So Leeanne?
Yeah, I agree with Derek completely. I think it's really about getting the economy going again from the big business, small business, and consumer level, and what things can be put into place that are going to actually have a ripple effect that actually trickle down all the way through those levels. Because I think when that will benefit all businesses at every stage. So I think exactly what Derek was saying. It's about getting the economy going, starting with the big picture infrastructure, that will affect really everybody as construction starts to get going, as people start to have different abilities to, have cash in their jeans to keep spending money to support local businesses and just keep moving.
I think it's adorable that you think people out there are still wearing jeans and not just in their pajamas and sweatpants. Very, very, very optimistic. Mark?
Again, I would say, I'm always very excited about the future. I'm very excited about opportunities. I'm very excited about new things. The challenge with that, with again, go back to my change management, is that getting there is very tough and it's very painful on individual levels, right? There's going to be some really tough times ahead and some tough decisions ahead. But like you guys have mentioned, there's opportunities on infrastructure projects, some incentivizing projects. I think it's become clear that our healthcare system has challenges. I think we're going to see more how we're not very resilient when it comes to our food chain. As you look at the meat plants in Alberta, supply chain in general of whether it's PPE or what is it, toilet paper is whatever, right? Like there's a lot of things that you can get really creative and see opportunities, whether you're right, retrofitting how offices and retail operate and look and just function physically. Tons and tons of things there that for people to take advantage of, and there could be a role for the government to incentivize to try and accelerate some of those. And again, I would say there's environmental type work, there's technology apps, and stuff. There was starting to be a really good buzz here in Saskatchewan. You got to make sure that we don't lose momentum, because technology is clearly becoming even more and more critical and more important. And so you don't want to lose that momentum. So yeah, I was saying, yeah, so I did want to say just environment and energy of all types, right? Whether it's traditional oil and gas or new things. There's huge opportunities there. And, I want to see Saskatchewan be front and center and succeed in all of those spaces. So I think, my other thing that I always try to tell folks is to really think about what you envision. What do you think this could look like in 5 or 10 years as a society, or for your business, or for you personally? It's not going to go back to the way it was. So how do you want it to look? I can guarantee, not to get on the anti-big business, I can tell you big business is thinking about that. They're thinking about how they want it to look. They're thinking about how they don't want to lose an inch of their wealth or their market share, and they are going to be doing everything they can to preserve that. So you need to do the same thing, is my point. Otherwise, you will get steamrolled and you will get left in the dust, whether individually or as a province or whatever. So yeah, again, if you can find the time of just trying to manage this chaos to thinking about those bigger picture things, if you don't think about them, then yeah, you can't be surprised by the results.
Well, I think that's probably a good question to end on. It came up earlier in the conversation, and it was around this notion of whether people have actually started to see unexpected opportunity arising from the pandemic. There's been a couple examples that Mark, you've thrown out with the, beer delivery, Leeanne talking about retrofitting spaces and helping people with that. I know, even in our business, we started doing this series and putting out some advice and whatnot, and all of a sudden these things unexpectedly take on a life of their own. And so there's definitely been some opportunity in it. I'm wondering if you can share from your own businesses, if anything has cropped up that, if this hadn't happened, you probably wouldn't have stumbled upon, or something that is a bit of a silver lining, maybe a hopeful note to conclude our day on. And I'll just open it up to whoever wants to share something.
I don't think, Jeff, that we've seen external opportunities as a result of this. What we've been able to do is sort of take the downtime and streamline our operations and make them more efficient. So that's been our biggest opportunity that we've been able to take advantage of, and nothing externally, but only things that will hopefully better serve our customers as we go through this new normal. And I really like Mark's advice of shaping sort of what you want that new normal to be for your company, for yourself, take time to look at that big picture. And that's hopefully what we've been able to do.
I really like that perspective. We often tell folks that it's important to sort of take some time to work on your business as opposed to just working in it all the time. And I suppose this is a unique breather for a lot of folks to maybe spend some time on operations. So I'm glad to hear that you've found that as well. Mark or Leeanne?
I think two things. One, for us, there was perhaps some resistance to using technology, in such a capacity previously. And I think the comfort level that people have now, just being able to connect completely virtually, I think that a lot of the barriers or the fear around that has been removed. So I think that'll be a really positive thing going forward. Just, how simple it is to just get onto a Zoom call or a Teams call. And, even just the chat function in some of these programs, it's been really good. But, when I look at bigger picture within a lot of the industries we work within, healthcare being a big part of that, the situation that's currently happening with the long-term care, it's really brought to the forefront how, shared rooms where you got, 2 people or 4 people in a room, that type of planning is not sustainable. And, we've known is not best practice at all for well over 20 years. And I think that's going to have a really positive effect where we're able to replan those spaces to have proper infection control. And I think there'll be a relook at how those things are handled within that type of environment, which will be really positive going forward. So I think there'll be a lot of things that are brought to the forefront through this that will change how space is designed and how people approach those things.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what the world looks like 20 years from now when some of those investments have come to fruition. Mm-hmm. Mark, any thoughts on the opportunity or the silver lining that's come out of this?
Yeah, I think, that's where I would come, despite everyone having to be physically distanced, my experience, and I think for a lot of people, has been how much more connected we are with each other and with our community, and how much more we value those relationships. And again, on a really basic level is, people wanting to support local restaurants or support local breweries, or, you follow Facebook groups and people are like, I want to purchase X. I want to make sure I buy it from a local company. So people they're realizing that that's important. They're realizing you have to take care of the community. You have to take care of your neighbors. I'm really hoping that's the stuff where I don't want to go back to normal again, where everyone's just running around like crazy and looking for the cheapest garbage they can possibly get out of China or whatever, right? And I understand why we got to that point, but I hope that, I think that's where there's some really great things that can come out of this and make us really powerful and successful. So yeah, that's where I keep telling people I'm not glad that we went through a pandemic crisis, but I'm really glad at some of the things that I think can come out of it.
Anything that we think Regina is specifically positioned to take advantage of as a result of this or coming out of this? Any strengths we have where there's an opportunity for our city coming out of this? You kind of hinted around it a bit, Mark.
I think it's going to be the other one that's really popping into my head when I say, when's the next time you're going to be able to fly? So I think we're really lucky that we are landlocked. I think we're really lucky that we are behind the times and kind of sheltered. I always keep telling people we have a crystal ball. We can see into the future. But because we maybe can't do a lot of traveling this year, you can get out and discover Saskatchewan. And so, I'm sure Tourism Saskatchewan, I've got lots of friends there. They're not necessarily marketing to the world this year. They're marketing to our very own people. And so there's some really cool stuff to check out and see, and you can go for some fun day trips. There's a ton of that Regina and Saskatchewan has to offer that our own folks don't even realize. So yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity, and I look forward to that.
LeeAnn or Derek, anything to add?
I think even on the supply chain front, local businesses, local farms, local gardens, things like that, that'll be something that's really at our forefront this summer. I'm really excited about that. So, as we look to those things, I think that, the focus on local is a really positive thing, and hopefully is a lasting effect long term.
Yeah, I think those two summarize it well, right? Like Mark said, being landlocked, and then I was at the butcher shop the other day, and they say there is going to be a food shortage, like for beef. But we're surrounded by it, right? The butcher in Assiniboia, Saskatchewan, will sell you half a beef still if you want one. There's not going to be, and he's going to buy it from a rancher down the road. So that's going to present those people with an opportunity, as well as keep us happy and healthy and fed.
Excellent. Well, on that note, we will conclude our panel discussion. I want to thank again my three wonderful panelists. A great discussion today. Really appreciated it. I enjoyed that LeeAnn was able to arrange to have a gentleman go by with Lysol spray and wipes and be sanitizing things in the background. It was a great brand moment for 1080 architecture. Clearly going to be a very safe work environment when the time comes. Really appreciate the time and the discussion. I hope folks that have joined us today find it valuable. A reminder that we will put up the recording of the session later today, and you can also go review some of the previous sessions, particularly the last session. If you had questions about business relief programs that have been introduced, I encourage you to check that out. And we'll look forward to seeing some familiar returning faces next week when we do it all again on Tuesday morning. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Awesome. This was great.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.